Sod's Law. I don't know who Mr. Sod was, but I have encountered his law quite frequently in my life. His law, basically reduced to a sentence, is if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. And a well-known example of this is that if you drop a slice of buttered bread, it will land with the butter on the downside and hence ruin the meal. And that is applied much more widely. So if you are planning any event or trying to make a journey or trying to enter into a negotiation, if there are chances of things going wrong, then they have a tendency to go wrong more than you would expect, more than the odds. And that's something a law which I like, because we spend quite a lot of our time frustrated by accidents like dropping bread or whatever. And when we find that, as we feared and predicted, the event has turned out in the worst possible way or in a bad way, we just laugh and say, oh, it's Sod's Law. And that somehow makes it more palatable. Another version of a Sod's Law, or a working out of it, which I've always liked, is described very well by Jerome K. Jerome in his book Three Men in a Boat, a classic of English humour. And in that, I think, before they set out on their punt along the River Thames, the author explains the law of apparently inanimate objects causing trouble. And the example there I particularly remember is his description of how in a boat or elsewhere you have a length of rope and you tie it, you loop it round very carefully and tie it and lay it out in a nice and efficient manner. You come back a few hours later and it's in a horrible tangle. No one's been near it, and yet it seems to have come alive and tangled itself up, and there you are. And that, again, he applies to many different things, all sorts of objects which you leave in a reasonable shape. Hose pipes, for example, I seem to remember he says, they tend to dig themselves into the ground. You leave them for a few months and they've disappeared and they're now underground and you have to dig them out again. And so many objects seem to have a willful disobedience to our wishes and our hopes. And I find that I have a great amount of technology around me. I went through the computer revolution where you had to have lots of hard disks and hundreds of connecting wires because nothing seemed to connect to anything else. So I have boxes and shelves of connecting wires and piles of hard disks. And both these laws operate very often. You leave a drawer full of connecting wires and then you come and the one that you knew was there isn't there, and all the rest are in a terrible tangle, and you wonder whether to spend an hour sorting them out because you know that the next time you go back they'll be again in a tangle. So both these kinds of observation about life, which of course are based on a simple fact that in the case of Sod's Law and the others, we don't notice when things go well. We only notice it when they go badly. So although statistically the buttered side will fall 50% of the time on the floor, we don't notice the times when it doesn't do that. And so we tend to look back, as we do with our lives, and pick out the bad bits and the things that have failed and feel hard done by. And that tendency in human beings means that we think, oh, well, it always tends to go wrong, when of course it goes right half of the time. The consolation of those two laws, I find, is that it turns situations which, at first sight, you just feel fed up and irritated, and then you say, oh, well, it's 3 men in a boat, or it's Sod's Law, and then somehow you feel comforted because you are part of the great laws of physics and chemistry on this planet, and there's nothing much you can do about it.